It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday morning. October 17th, 1998. A cool mist drifted through the pine trees of Maple Hollow, Pennsylvania. The sound of birds, the distant hum of traffic, and the squeal of brakes from a yellow school bus, just another start to the day. At 7:42 a.m., traffic cameras caught the Cedar Creek Elementary School bus making a routine turn off Route 39. 32 children were on board. It never reached the school. By 8:15, teachers began calling parents. By 8:45, local police issued an alert. And by 9 a.m., the entire town of Maple Hollow had gathered outside the school, staring at an empty parking lot, wondering how a full-size bus with 32 children and one driver could simply disappear. When investigators later reviewed the last footage of the vehicle, they expected to find something that could explain what happened. Instead, they found something that would change everything. If this story shook you already, make sure to subscribe to Cold Case Secrets, where we uncover the truth behind the world's darkest mysteries. Maple Hollow was the kind of town where people still left their doors unlocked. It sat quietly in the Allegheny foothills, an old mill community with a single diner, one high school, and a church whose bells could be heard from nearly every street. Everyone knew everyone. Cedar Creek Elementary served the children of factory workers, teachers, and small business owners. That morning, October 17, 1998, started like any other parents bundling kids into jackets, waving goodbye as a yellow bus made its rounds through the misty back roads. The driver, Harold Dunn, had been with the district for over 20 years. He was punctual, careful, and deeply trusted. To most of the kids, he wasn't just a driver, he was Mr. Harold, the kind old man who kept spare crayons in his glove box for the younger ones and candy for those who'd had a rough morning. When Harold's bus failed to arrive that morning, no one panicked at first. Roads could be slick, deer were common, and sometimes he had to stop for maintenance trucks. But by 8:10, when the principal couldn't reach Harold's radio, she knew something was wrong. The route was barely 9 miles long, winding through forest and farmland before looping into town. There were only 5 stops. Harold had picked up his last group of children, a set of siblings named Amy and Michael Crowder, aged 9 and 11, just 10 minutes before vanishing. At 8:20 a.m., the first call came into Maple Hollow Police. A mother named Linda Crowder reported that her children had boarded the bus but never arrived at school. Within minutes, other parents echoed the same. Officers were dispatched to drive the route. They found nothing. No signs of skid marks, no collisions, no debris, just empty roads winding into mist. Then came the first real clue, a grainy traffic camera at the Route 39 intersection. At 7:42 a.m., it showed Harold's bus making a turn down Brookmere logging road, a dirt trail that led deep into the woods. It wasn't part of his route. Investigators replayed the footage several times. The timestamp glitched at the exact moment the bus made the turn. The image flickered. The bus's outline stretched slightly as if distorted by interference. And then, gone. For nearly 4 seconds, the frame showed only trees and a faint metallic blur behind the bus. Something reflective, moving fast, almost too fast for the camera to register. When the picture returned, the road was empty. By 10 a.m., local police and volunteers were combing through the Brookmere woods. Tire tracks from the bus were easy to spot in the dirt wide grooves cutting through fallen leaves. They followed them nearly half a mile before the tracks ended abruptly, as if the vehicle had lifted straight off the ground. No crash site, no skid marks, no drag patterns, just mud, leaves, and silence. Detective Mara Ellison, who led the investigation, later said in her report, "It was like chasing a ghost. We kept expecting to find an embankment, a body, something, but the trail just stopped. It didn't make sense." At the end of the tracks, searchers found something unsettling, a small lunchbox lying in the mud, its latch broken. Inside were 2 sandwiches, a juice box, and a handwritten note from a mother, "Love you, see you after school." There were no footprints, not even Harold's. The woods were still damp from overnight rain, so the lack of prints puzzled investigators. Even the rescue dogs refused to follow the scent beyond that point, whimpering and turning in circles as if confused. By nightfall, News crews had descended on Maple Hollow. Missing school bus, 32 children, and driver vanish ran across every major network. Helicopters hovered over forest, broadcasting live footage of flashing lights and search teams combing the hills. Parents gathered at Cedar Creek Elementary, clinging to one another. Reporters described the scene as collective heartbreak. The FBI joined within 24 hours. They closed off a logging road, set up command tents, and began interviewing witnesses. One local truck driver swore he'd seen a yellow bus heading south near the old quarry around 7:50 a.m., but there was no physical way it could have gotten there in that time frame. Another witness, a fisherman, claimed he saw something reflective and bright flying low above the trees that morning. Investigators dismissed it as hysteria. But deep down, no one could ignore the growing strangeness of it all. The missing footage, the vanishing tire marks, and the silence that hung over the forest like a fog that wouldn't lift. By the third day, the town was unraveling. Parents refused to leave the school gymnasium, sleeping on floors and praying in corners. Volunteers set up tables of food and flashlights. Church bells rang every evening at 7:42 the minute the bus was last seen. Detective Ellison's team scoured every back road, lake, and abandoned structure within a 20-mile radius. Still nothing. Then came the first real lead. At 4:37 p.m. on October 21st, 4 days after the disappearance, a hiker named Douglas Reeve called 911. He'd found what looked like a child's school shoe lodged between two rocks near the entrance to an abandoned radio tower facility deep in the forest. Police arrived within the hour. The shoe was small pink with a worn butterfly sticker on the side. It matched the description of one belonging to 8-year-old Marissa Lane, one of the missing children. Near the shoe, they found something else, a smear of yellow paint on a rusted steel, hatch leading underground. It was a service tunnel, and it opened recently. When officers unsealed the hatch, a heavy draft of cold air rushed out thick with the scent of gasoline and damp concrete. A single set of footprints led downward into the dark. Flashlights swept over corroded walls and collapsed beams as the team descended into the tunnel's structures dating back to World War II, used for communications and storage. At first, it seemed empty. Then one of the agents noticed something embedded in the dirt, a fragment of metal, charred and partially melted. Testing later confirmed it belonged to a school bus seat frame, but there was no sign of the bus or the children, just an eerie silence, broken only by the drip of water echoing through the tunnels. And on one wall, written faintly in chalk letters almost erased by time someone had scrawled, "We're still here." The tunnels beneath Maple Hollow were a relic from a forgotten war, built in the 1940s as part of a communications network. They were sealed off after several cave-ins in the 1970s. Few people in town even knew they existed. But now, investigators believe they might hold the key to one of the strangest disappearances in American history. For the next 72 hours, the area was locked down. The FBI brought in engineers, mapping drones, and forensic teams. Over 24 connected passageways were identified, some extending for miles beneath the forest, others collapsing into uncharted caverns. Inside, they found traces of tire rubber, chemical residue, and faded emergency lights that flickered to life for the first time in decades. At 2:14 a.m. on October 23rd, a search drone captured something chilling on its live feed. A tunnel wall smeared with small handprints, low to the ground children's height. The prints were faintly luminescent, glowing under ultraviolet light. Investigators first assumed it was chemical residue from old paint, but lab results later confirmed there were traces of phosphor compounds not available commercially in 1998. Someone had left those markings recently, and whatever the substance was, it wasn't paint. Back at headquarters, Detective Mar Ellison replayed the Route 39 traffic footage again and again. The flicker when the bus turned off the road bothered her. It wasn't a standard analog glitch. She sent the tape to forensic analysts at Quantico, who confirmed the interference wasn't due to power surge or tape damage. It was frequency disruption, a wave pattern consistent with electromagnetic interference. In simple terms, something had generated a massive pulse near that bus. When slowed to 1/30 th a second, a single frame stood out. Behind the bus, through the fog, There was a distortion like heat haze, except shaped almost like a sphere, reflecting faint light from the brake lamps. The reflection wasn't solid metal. It looked fluid. We thought it was a reflection off the windshield, Ellison said later, but it moved against the direction of the bus, like a shimmer, following it. She stared at that still frame for hours. The timestamp at the bottom read 7 hours, 42 minutes, and 16 seconds. That was the last moment anyone ever saw the bus. News of the tunnel discovery spread fast. Reporters camped outside police lines, speculating wildly. Some claimed the bus had been abducted by a secret cult. Others hinted at military experiments gone wrong. The town spiraled into paranoia. Radios picked up bursts of static. Livestock went missing. Children claimed to hear whispering through the trees at night. Local newspapers ran headlines like, "Maple Hollow cursed?" The sound below what authorities aren't saying. Detective Ellison held a press conference to calm fears, but her words did little to help. Behind closed doors, even she couldn't shake the unease. Her team's body cameras captured strange interference whenever they entered the tunnels. Audio distortions, whispers, and one unexplained childlike laugh echoing through the feed. Technicians wrote it off as radio bounce. But to those who heard it in person, it felt wrong. 5 days later, a team of engineers drilling near the abandoned quarry, roughly 5 miles from the tunnel site, hit hollow ground. When they broke through, they discovered a sealed maintenance corridor leading to what appeared to be an underground garage. On the far wall, they found a bus-sized outline burned into concrete. The shape was scorched, surrounded by blackened residue. In the center lay a melted rear-view mirror, and fragments of safety glass fused into the floor. Whatever had happened there had involved intense heat high enough to melt steel, but the surrounding walls showed no sign of fire. Lab results suggested the residue contained elements of fused silica and carbonized paint, but also traces of magnesium oxide, a compound found in aircraft components, not school buses. "It looked like something had disintegrated there," said one technician, "but not burned, more like it was pulled apart." While reviewing old construction records, a junior agent named Mark Jensen uncovered a box of declassified blueprints from 1972 labeled Project Echo. The documents described a government experiment conducted beneath Maple Hollow, a series of acoustic resonance tests meant to study human perception under frequency extremes. The goal was to develop low-frequency sound weapons and tunnel communications. But the project was shut down abruptly after several neurological incidents among staff. Page after page described sound experiments that caused hallucinations, vertigo, and temporary blindness. One file mentioned phase shift protocols involving electromagnetic pulses designed to measure how sound waves could affect matter density. The lead scientist on the project was Dr. Leonard Kersey, a name that appeared nowhere else in federal databases. When agents mapped the 1998 bus disappearance coordinates, they noticed something chilling. The point where the bus vanished on Route 39 aligned almost perfectly with the central node of Project Echo's underground grid from 1972. It was as if the bus had driven straight over the heart of the experiment site. Forensic reconstruction placed the location of the melted bus outline directly beneath that same spot, nearly 120 feet underground. The implication was impossible unless some remnant of the old project was still active. If a power surge or a resonance discharge occurred that morning, said an engineer, it might explain the electromagnetic interference. But it doesn't explain how 33 people vanished without trace. While drilling deeper into the tunnels, a construction worker's camera picked up an object embedded in the rock, a license plate, nearly pristine, with a number belonging to Harold Dunn's bus. The odd part? The plate was fused inside a solid rock face. Geologists confirmed the stone was natural, formed long before the 1990s. The plate's edges showed no signs of insertion or tampering. It was as if the rock had formed around it. When they tried to extract it, their drill bit snapped. Inside the recording of that operation, a faint hum can be heard rising in the background, an oscillating frequency that builds until the camera abruptly cuts to static. Moments later, the worker who'd been nearest the plate collapsed, claiming he heard children screaming through the walls. He never returned to the site. Back at command headquarters, analysts reviewed the final seconds of the camera feed. The static wasn't random. It carried rhythmic pulses like a coded signal. When slowed down and filtered through spectrographic software, those pulses formed an audible pattern. The frequency matched archive data from Project Echo. But more disturbing was what they found underneath. A layered background sound, faint and distorted, almost like a recording of voices. Children's voices. They were singing. A nursery rhyme, Ring Around the Rosie. After that discovery, the case fell into bureaucratic silence. Federal teams removed all evidence from the site, citing public safety. The tunnels were sealed, the quarry fenced off, and every investigator required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Detective Ellison was reassigned within weeks. The town was left without answers. For the families, it was a second loss, the disappearance of truth itself. Memorials sprang up across Maple Hollow. Playgrounds were named, murals painted, but the shadow of the missing bus lingered. Radios still crackled with faint static along Route 39. Some nights, truckers claimed to hear laughter echoing through the mist. They say if you drive that road right before sunrise, one local whispered, you can see the reflection of headlights behind you, but nothing in your mirrors. Years later, Ellison would admit she couldn't sleep through storms. Every time thunder hit, I thought I heard their voices, she said. The case files were sealed indefinitely, marked Unsolved Ongoing. But in her private notes, she'd written one final line before being transferred. Whatever happened to those children didn't come from this world. Thank you for watching Cold Case Secrets. If you found yourself unsettled, hit subscribe, because the next chapter, it's coming and the truth behind what happened in that house is far worse than we thought. Part 2 coming soon.